So what is the proper way to use this stuff? And it's kind of funny, if you have friends that play with body filler, you might want to ask them, what's the proper mix ratio? Because it seems like everybody will give you a different answer. And the reality is, for the traditional style body fillers, the manufacturers pretty much all recommend a 2% hardener to filler ratio by weight, okay? Which means it's a 50-to-1 ratio. And it's again by weight. And do you know anybody who measures these materials on a scale when they mix them together? Probably not. So the challenge is to find what 50-to-1 looks like when you build your puddle of filler and then apply your stripe of hardener to it. If you put too much hardener in it, it will harden too quickly and become brittle, and you're risking less work time and maybe cracking down the line. And more often, people don't put enough hardener in it, and you can work it a little bit longer, but what ends up happening is the filler inside sometimes will never fully cure. And then you've always got this mass of liquid-based polyester on the side of the car, which eventually sags and it loses its adhesion and cracks and can fall out. So it's really important to get that mix ratio dead nuts. The other concern is temperature. Some people will like to add additional hardener if it's cold out, so that the stuff, what they say, kicks or hardens quicker, or they put a little less hardener when it's hot out to give them a little extra working time. But the body filler, it always wants that proper 50-to-1 ratio. So I believe most manufacturers recommend only about a 1% variance in the amount of hardener that you can use. On the premium filler, like the Quantum1, they came up with a completely different system of chemistry, which actually has a 10-to-1 ratio. So you're using a lot more hardener for filler amount, but it's a little bit easier to be accurate when you're using a larger mix ratio. But again, you want to make sure you get that ratio down properly. Evercoat makes a nice poster that you can use as a reference. You can hang this up on your shop wall if you're going to be spreading the filler. And it's got different sizes of puddles, 2 inches up to 6, I think actually up to 8 inches. And you can compare the size that you poured out as opposed to what's on the poster, and make sure you draw the right number of hardener stripes across the puddle to get the right ratio. I think the most important part is to make sure that your car fits the way you want it to in bare steel before you even get to the body filler stage. The nicer the body shell, the less filler you'll need. Proper application of the body filler actually depends on the panels themselves. You want to make sure you have some sort of sanding scratch on the panel so that the filler has what they call a mechanical adhesion, or it can bite into the panel and latch onto it. In the old days, they would say rough them up real good with like a 36 grit sandpaper. Today, they think that's a little bit too much. You can probably get away with an 80 grit scratch on a steel panel. But most importantly, after that scratch, you want to make sure you clean the panel. And it's more than just blow it off with compressed air. The best thing to do is take an alcohol wipe or some wax and grease remover and wipe that panel down to get all the dust out of those little scratches you just put into it, so that the body filler has something to cling to. Now, one of the enemies of a good body filler application is air bubbles, believe it or not. And you get air bubbles in your body filler material when you stir the can. It's important to stir this stuff up because the components can settle out and not be evenly distributed throughout the can. But if you overstir it or stir it too quickly or whip it up, you'll end up getting air bubbles in the filler, which you'll then spread onto the side of the car. And then when you sand the car, they'll reveal themselves as little craters or pinholes, and that's what you don't want. So with traditional body filler, it's important to stir it slowly so that you're not introducing a lot of air into it. With this new Quantum1 style, it's actually much more creamy than the old style traditional body filler, and the material that makes up the body of the filler actually sits on top of the solvents. So when you open the can, it looks like it's all mixed up and ready to go, but you might find that when you dig down in there, you've got a layer of solvents on the bottom that need to be mixed together. But the Quantum1 is thin enough to where most of the bubbles will go ahead and rise and bubble out on its own. The next challenge is to get the body filler out of the can and onto some sort of surface to mix it up. And you've seen people use cardboard before, and that's not recommended because The cardboard itself can absorb some of the styrene chemical out of the body filler and upset the chemistry and cause for a weird mixing ratio. And likewise, there might be things in that cardboard that the body filler absorbs and are introduced into the filler, which can again cause for an imperfect mixture. So we use a pad of paper you can buy designed specifically for this. They're called clean sheets, and it's a very heavy-bodied pad that is mounted on a piece of wood or masonite, and you can mix up the body filler without worrying about the filler leaching into the paper or the paper leaching into the filler. When you've got your puddle of filler on your mixing surface, you can use a body filler mixing paddle to stir this stuff up. Be careful not to stir it in a circular motion because again that can add air bubbles. In fact, what they recommend is to hold your paddle at about a 45-degree angle and push it downward as you mix the two components together. And this downward motion will help squeeze any air bubbles out so that you end up with nothing but filler that is nice and uniform in its mix.